Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Do you know that feeling when you feel like you see something, and others don't, and you have a hard time convincing others it was real? Usually, it's one or two of your overly paranormal believing friends against the word of your logical friends. I was born and raised in the Middle East in the United Arab Emirates. There, ghosts aren't a thing people really talk about, but we believe in jinn or demons. Not in a paranormal way, but rather in terms of religious beliefs. So, growing up, my mom and dad always taught me little things, like cultural things we took part in, such as saying the name of God when I'm afraid to help relieve fear when I used to get scared of the dark, and so on. You should also know, believing in ghosts is a bit of a taboo due to religious reasons. So growing up, I never believed in the paranormal. It wasn't right nor encouraged. The setting of this event is in the Middle East. A group of 12 friends and I, a 19-year-old female from high school, decided to go for a road and camping trip, but hadn't fully decided where yet. Driving to other states would have just taken a few hours between states. For those of you living in other countries, a drive between each of our states usually takes anywhere between an hour and 4 hours depending on the state. We decided to use 2 cars. My friend had a 2000 Nissan Patrol Safari that could fit 8 people because there was a seat in the trunk area that opened into a 3-person seat. We decided to use 1 car for mostly passengers and 1 for all the food and camping equipment. My parents dropped me and 4 of my friends off at a petrol station where the whole group was meeting up to drive off together and to grab some snacks, gas, and some ice for our coolers before we decided to head off. The whole time, we don't really have a clear plan as to where we are going to camp. But one thing is worth mentioning, we live in a very safe place, and it's 90% mountains and desert, so there aren't any creepy woods or much of anything to hide behind. So it's not uncommon for people to just randomly drive around across the roads until they find somewhere that looks like a good place to camp. We also weren't really planners, and half the time had no idea the exact area we were driving through. There isn't much you could go wrong with though, because the roads between the states are always straight and there aren't multiple directions you need to follow. We drove about 2 hours until we reached a place called Al Masefi, where we stopped for lunch at a small restaurant, and then drove another hour until we got to a place called Juma Bazaar, or the Friday markets. Now, if you heard this story from my friend who was with me when this happened, she wouldn't have mentioned it because she thinks I'm reading too much into it. But when I was at the bazaar, I was speaking to one of the locals of the area about the wide variety of fruits he was selling. He was also selling bag lychees that looked like they were going to expire soon for a much cheaper price. I asked him, do people actually buy these? I can't imagine eating all these fruits fast enough to finish it before they all expire. He looked at me completely seriously and said,
"It's okay if I don't sell them, I'll just drive them down that road."
He starts pointing to a path that looks off-road, but cars have clearly worn the path out.
"And when I drive back, they'll be fresh again."
I genuinely laughed, because I assumed since Arabic wasn't his first language, what I said got lost in translation, or that he meant he'll just be there, where maybe the farm is, and get fresh lychees. Keep this part in mind for later. At this point it is about 3 p.m. We got into the car and decided to drive to a spot my friend had gone to before with his family. He put the location into Google Maps and we drove off. When we were driving through the spot, we passed a village. The village was incredible. There were people sitting outside their homes and waving at our car as we drove past. Villagers did this often with city folks, and especially more so in smaller villages like the one we drove through. While we were going through the village, I found the need to mention that they really wanted us to get out of our cars. A man at some point stepped in front of our car, and if we were going any faster, we would have hit him. He had a tray of pomegranates cut up and started yelling,
"Please come eat, come eat."
The pomegranates were so red, so fresh and so red, almost as if they were literally just picked off a tree. Pomegranates cannot be grown naturally where we are, so for that villager to have it, they would have had to gone to a supermarket to get it. We thought that the villagers were being very hospitable, but my friends said we have wasted so much time stopping, and if we stop in the village, we will have to set up our tents in the dark. We drove through the village, not stopping even though we thought that we were being practically forced out of our cars with food and invites to the villagers' homes. My friend even said,
"They offer you food and then force you to buy their fruits and handmade items, I bet."
I wasn't unsettled then. The group I was traveling with was too big for me to be scared, but something about those people made me want to get out, like I wanted to stay there with them. I'll describe the village a bit. The houses were made of large brick-shaped stones, held together with a paste made of hay and mud. There were multiple houses spread across the area. The village was heavily populated. There were chickens just roaming around, with goats and even a donkey and her young. There were kids, as passed by a group of boys playing football. There were a lot of people there. When we got to our camp it was 7 p.m., and we didn't take long to set up. We managed to set up our camp way before it was fully dark and even made a fire. We sat around the fire, took out some drinks from our cooler and put some marinated chicken over the fire. Nothing about our campsite was scary. The whole area in front of us was simply desert as far as you eye could see. We had set up camp above a dune, and about 2 kilometers behind us were a few mountains we could very clearly see, not just the outline of, but even during the evening at 7 p.m., I could clearly see the mountain. The scariest thing you'll probably encounter here is a goat chewing through your tent. Snakes, scorpions, and smaller desert foxes are possible, but highly unlikely if there is a fire lit in the area. We also weren't the only campers. There was a family with 2 kids camping a few dunes over. We spent a long time by the fire, talking and eating food. We all went to bed at around 2 a.m. It was pitch black and I was freezing beyond belief, and went into the tent I was sharing with 2 others. I don't really know when the last person decided to sleep, but I know that when I woke up at 4:10 a.m., I wouldn't hear anything at all from my camp. It was dead silent. So silent that I could clearly make out that the family that we saw earlier in the day was up and talking. I heard the opening and closing of doors, a lot of talking. It sounded like they were whisper yelling. Like yelling, but at whispers. They were not speaking English. It was either German or something that sounded German. No one else heard this, so I can't confirm what language it was. But I know that about 20 minutes or so later I heard the car start and I could hear the car driving off. It's also not uncommon for people to camp through only half the night, especially since it was a weekday and maybe they needed to be somewhere the next day. I fell asleep and woke up at around 5 a.m., as did all my friends in the tent, and it was starting to get lighter outside. We got out of the tent to go to the bathroom. It's a desert, and not many places for privacy. So we thought we'd go find a place in a group and do so before all the boys woke up too. As I was holding a blanket up around my friends, we looked up and noticed what looked like a woman dressed in traditional clothing, with her face mostly covered on top of the mountain behind our camp. She was looking straight at us. Maybe she was curious. Maybe she was a villager. We don't know if there was another village on the other side of that mountain where she came from. My friend waved at her. She didn't wave back, she just stood there. Then turned around and walked backwards. I felt goosebumps. I didn't like that. My head turned towards where the other group of campers were. They'd definitely gone. I looked back, and there was that woman, not having fully left the mountain, but now it was like she was sitting, and I could only see the top half of her head. Was she waiting for us to leave? The rest of our day was normal. We talked and played games and ate. We even packed up our stuff before sundown and just relaxed around the fire until 8 p.m. It was starting to get darker now, and we decided to drive back home. We all got into our car and drove towards the mountains to take a path from around the mountains to see where the woman came from. But there was no village there. Maybe the woman was like us, a camper that climbed onto the mountain and left later. It wasn't scary, but slightly unsettling that she chose to stare at us. We were driving through the same village we passed through the day before. But there was no one there. Sure, it was nighttime and they could be sleeping. But what freaked us out was how the village looked wrecked. Like it wasn't lived in. The houses looked like they'd fallen apart, the bricks strewn across the road. Our tires going over them and causing the car to shake, which added to the pure fear I felt. It looked like a bomb had gone off, but there were no bodies, no people at all. No animals, nothing. The buildings that remained had bits missing, like they had been decaying for years. Where are we? My friend opened her phone.
El Jezred El Hamra.
She started reading the articles, Ghost Town. What was weird was how this place was only an hour away from our city, which is weird, because we haven't been driving for 4 hours. We haven't passed any of the places we had to pass. We haven't been driving for longer than 2 hours and we're only an hour away from our city. We saw the other car. We were horrified, all of us. It was like we accelerated somehow, or drove for much longer than we thought we were driving. We drove through the city. It was like I could literally see the same house that I saw only a day ago, but this time, ruined, aged like they had been abandoned for years. We reached the end of the village, existing onto a proper road. Sitting in the seat at the very back, I was too scared to look back to the village. But my friend did. She started crying with panic. There was that woman, the same one from the mountain, running behind our car. The whole time we were driving through the village we didn't see her, nor did we see anyone else. But there she was running. Running as though she wanted to harm us. The car went impossibly fast, both the cars, and we drove away from the village. We were terrified. I didn't sleep when I got home. I told my mom what happened, and she told me to pray and even asked an imam, our priest, to pray for me. I moved out of the country a few months later. I didn't feel okay anymore. Every now and then I Google the place, watch videos, and read articles about the village. The village was abandoned in 1968. We visited this place in 2019 in broad daylight, and there definitely were people there, but not when we passed through it again at night. Remember the story I said about the local fruit seller saying he drives through an area to make the lychees fresh? The most ridiculous thing that happened was when we unloaded the cooler to empty the water left behind by the melted ice. But the ice wasn't melted. There they were, all the ice in perfect cubes. Not melted, not frozen into a blob, but perfect into cubes, as if they had never melted. None of us know what we went through that night. Most of us don't really speak to each other anymore, but if we do, we never speak of this trip.
My family and I were visiting our relatives in Pakistan 2 years ago. My uncle's house, from my mom's side, is right beside my aunt's house, to the right of it. The way it is, it's like the house is in a dead end facing another house, a woman who usually comes to our house just for visits because of their neighbors, and to the right of my uncle's house is my cousin's house. And to the left is my aunt's house. This is where it happened. The two houses are separated by a small dirt road, about 1.5 meters wide. So, it's about 11 p.m. when my mom tells me to go to my aunt's house, the one on the left, and get some milk for my baby brother. He was 6 then, and I go with my uncle's dog, Jimmy, and when I'm coming back, I'm at the gate. There's a big iron gate in front of her house, when the dog starts barking at something on the outside of the gate. I stop because I get terrified, like I literally wet myself. Okay, not really, but I was really scared, and I look at the gate. Underneath there's about a 5 centimeter separation between the gate and the cement floor, and I look down there and see hooves, goat hooves, running back and forth, and since the wall stretches outside the gate there's only like a 1 meter distance to run in between them, and the hooves are running into the right side. Then all of a sudden they're just flipped, like when you use the mirror feature on the computer, and then they run to the left when they touch the wall, and back to the right. Well, I'm just standing there terrified because goats make lots of noise when they run, and if they run into a wall they bleat. Well, this one is just running into the walls without making a sound. All I hear is the wind and Jimmy, the dog, growling, and after about 2 minutes it stops. I stand there for a few more minutes and wait until Jimmy stops growling, and when he does I'm still standing there for another 5 minutes to be sure, and then I slowly open the gate, and Jimmy jumps outside, and since I don't hear anything more from him I too run outside, shut the gate, and run back to my uncle's house. When I got home it was 11:22. So I was there for 20 minutes and it took me 2 minutes to get the milk. Looking back at it now I realize that it wasn't a ghost. It was a Djinn. If you're brown you know that these creatures are shapeshifters and you cannot see them in their original forms. They can be standing right in front of you and you wouldn't see anything. They're a big part of my culture, and my mom once told me that my grandfather, her dad, once actually taught one of them at his school. But that's a story for another day.
It was my sister's wedding. Me and all my family live in Mumbai, but we often visit our village during the Diwali vacation. Only once a year. So it was my sister's wedding in my village, so my whole family went to the village to celebrate it. First small introduction of my house in the village. It was one-story house. On the ground floor there are 4 rooms, kitchen, bathroom and toilet. At the side of the toilet there is a staircase that leads to the first floor. On the first floor there are only 2 rooms and a veranda, or you can call it a big balcony, and a staircase leading to the terrace of the house. So all my joint family were living in the house to celebrate my sister's marriage. The night we reached home in the village I was very tired. All of my family were given their rooms to sleep in. Me and my uncle and my cousins were sleeping on the first floor veranda. On the first night, I was very tired so I slept peacefully. On the second night we all slept a little late. In the middle of the night I wake up to answer the call of nature. When I woke up I saw my grandmother standing and leaning down from the wall of the veranda. I felt a little weird. Because my grandmother was sleeping on the ground floor and what she was doing on the first floor at 2 a.m. in the morning. When she saw me, she just started walking downstairs. I went behind her. She took left and went towards the toilet. I also went towards the toilet and saw the light of the toilet on. I waited outside the toilet. I thought she was in. But after waiting for approximately 5 minutes, I just checked the room my grandmother was sleeping in. She was sleeping peacefully. When I opened the door of the toilet, there was no one, but at that time I was feeling very sleepy, so I didn't pay much attention to it. I went inside the toilet and answered the call of nature and went to the first floor veranda and slept. In the morning, when I asked my grandmother what she was doing on the first floor at night, she replied that yesterday night she never went on the first floor. She then further replied that there is a Djinn living on the terrace of the house. When I shared these incidents with my father, he said that yes, there is a Djinn. But he also said that after the renovation of the house there is no trace of the Djinn. My father further said that when they were small they always heard that someone was walking on the staircase drinking water from a pot, but the Djinn never harm us. My father also told the story of my aunt. He said when my aunt came in the house as a newly bride, she saw these Djinn in her husband, my uncle, form. And at that time my uncle was living in Dubai. So she was very scared and went to some mullah and asked for help. Mullah came and blessed the house and went. At that night when my aunt had a dream, in dream she saw a man with a beard and his face was half burnt. The man said that he will never let my aunt stay in the house. After this incident, whenever my aunt slept in our house, she always felt someone was shaking her toes and she always fell ill. Even her children fall ill if they stay in our house. Later my uncle built a separate house away from ours. Djinn are of two types, one evil and one good. I came to know that the Djinn that was living in my house was good. He never harmed us nor my aunt. He just wanted her to stay away from this house.
You all read about the magical genie of Aladdin. Well, these genies do exist. But they don't live in old lamps, and they also are not magical. But they have some supernatural powers, like they can go through walls, change forms, take over human bodies, etc. They are related to angels and demons. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. Sometimes we make mistakes by mentioning bad genies as demons and good ones as angels. But genies are different from angels and demons, as genies are earthly creatures. In my country, Bangladesh, this genie is known as Djinn. Good ones don't bother us, but bad ones interfere in our lives. Believe me, these creatures are real. I know many stories about Djinns. My family and I have some experience too. Well, this occurred when I was about 10 or 11 years old. One evening my younger brother came down screaming from upstairs. He hurriedly burst into my room, which was downstairs, and sat on my bed panting. At that time my father and mother came into my room. Seeing him panting, they were worried and asked him what happened. He said that he saw a totally white man standing beside the maidservant's room. Our maidservant's room is beside the staircase. We all took it seriously. Because another incident happened days before, that is, one night 2 cats were fighting and making terrible noises. So me, my brother and my mother chanted, "If you are a Djinn then go away," 3 times in Bangla, my mother language. We chanted these words because Djinn like to take the forms of cats, especially black cats, and also it is believed that if you chant these words 3 times then the Djinn will go away. As we chanted these words, the cats left the place that instant moment. We were both amazed and frightened that time. Some days later, after that incident about my brother, I was going upstairs, and suddenly I felt that there was another presence. So, I looked around myself and what I saw made me want to faint. I saw a totally white figure standing in front of our maidservant's room. I just closed my eyes and ran down the stairs. As I was running down the stairs, I nearly fell 2 times as my eyes were closed. However, I went to my mom's room panting and explained everything to her. At that time my brother was there. He said that he also had seen the same figure that day. I am sure that is not a coincidence. But after that incident of mine we didn't see that figure again. But last year we saw smoke in certain rooms. We searched everywhere in these rooms and the rooms near them. We also searched the outside of our house, but we didn't find anything burning or any object from which smoke can come out. We also got a strange smell of perfume along with the smoke. I believe that there was a Djinn in our house, as these are the characteristics of a Djinn. And if there is a smell of perfume, then it is believed that the Djinn is good. So I think the Djinn was good as it did no harm to us.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.